Well, the New York Jets have finally made their decision. On Wednesday, they hired Aaron Glenn as the club's full-time head coach. It's a return to where it all started for him, a first-round pick in 1994 out of Texas A&M. Looking at the Jets, they have a lot of work to do this offseason, considering the fact that, well, for one, they've got a lot of guys that they're going to have to make decisions on, whether they restructure them, re-sign them. This team doesn't have a lot of salary cap. They don't have exactly the best draft pick in the world
At seven.
considering the fact of how many teams ahead of them need quarterbacks. The only two QBs that I think can be game changers, Shador Sanders and Cam Ward. The Jets are not going to be able to get one of those two guys unless they trade it up to number one. But to that point, is it really worth it? Probably not. Aaron Rodgers is currently on this roster. We'll get more into him in the future of this video. But just looking at Glenn, I think if one guy can come in here that was available and just completely turn around the Jets, one of the most dysfunctional teams in all of sports right now, it is going to be Glenn because he has more than 25 years of experience in the National Football League, including playing, front office, and coaching experience. As a player, he learned under probably the NFL's greatest program builder in Bill Parcells. As a coach, he saw success under Sean Payton in New Orleans before moving to Detroit with Dan Campbell. So he's got Payton backing him, he's got Dan Campbell backing him. I mean, what better two guys than them to be able to do that? And Glenn, he's just an intense competitor who will challenge players and turn a losing culture into winning one. That's one of the first things he said when being hired by the Jets is just get ready to win. And that's what the Jets need because again, guys, they haven't made the playoffs since 2010. They haven't won the AFC since 2002. It's a long, long time. I mean, they're in a serious drought right now, even more than the Lions, like the Cleveland Browns, the teams that we used to laugh at, but now we're laughing at the Jets. They're a 5-12 team. They actually won more games with Zach Wilson than they did with Aaron Rodgers. And to me, the Jets, they have a lot of great players in their prime. Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, Quincy Williams. Of course, they got some older guys like CJ Mosley and Devontae Adams that are still very, very capable of making big time plays. But the biggest question is going to be who's the GM, who's the offensive coordinator, and what do they do with Aaron Rodgers? Because if you look at the numbers, statistically speaking, Rodgers threw for 3,897 yards. That was eighth in football, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 48.1 QBR. But the numbers get even better when you look at the last 10 weeks of the season. Rodgers had 18 touchdowns against 4 interceptions. I mean, those are elite numbers. Rodgers, he's not the 2021 version with the Packers, of course, when he won MVP, but he's still a very, very good QB that's capable of winning football games and playing winning football. So for the Jets, who again own that sixth pick, actually, they have the seventh pick, my bad. The Jets have the seventh pick. So what exactly are they going to be able to do with that? Because, Cam Ward, Shador Sanders, they're not going to be there at seven. So the Jets, they might as well just draft the best player on the board to that point, bring back Aaron Rodgers, and then draft the future of their program. I would say maybe in day two, right? So like the second or third or the fourth round, and just have a guy under Rodgers who can be the future. I think that's what the Jets should do. It's very easy to just go out there and just to bring in a guy right away. But just considering that the Jets actually have a very competitive roster and they've got competent quarterback play, I do think it would be in their best interest to just continue what they have. They're going to have to make a decision on Devontae Adams. They're going to have to restructure his contract. If they're not able to, they'll probably end up releasing him. Garrett Wilson might end up asking for a trade, or he could want a contract extension. He's coming off of the best season of his career, 101 receptions, 1,104 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns. In terms of the defense, well, Glenn, when he went to the Lions, he inherited the worst defense in football. It was ranked 32nd. But under his guidance, the Lions improved to number 7 in 2024, despite all of the injuries. Glenn was able to patch together a lineup that lost 5 starters, including Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, Carlton Davis III, plus multiple key backups to injured reserve. The Lions finished number 1 on third down, 32.43%, number 5 against the run, 98.4 yards per game, tied for 5th in interceptions with 16, and tied for 10th in takeaways with 24. And looking at the Jets defense last season, it was actually pretty solid. I mean, they were third overall in terms of total yards allowed. In terms of total passing yards allowed, they were fourth. They were 17th in rushing yards allowed, and they were 20th in total points allowed. Now, they did a lot of bad things. Like, for example, they had 128 missed tackles, which was fifth overall, and 44.6% of drives ended in an offensive score, which was 30th overall. So in the red zone, too, they were 27th. They gave up 37 touchdowns. So this isn't a perfect defense, but it's definitely not a bad defense. It's not the worst defense like Aaron Glenn when he went to the Lions and he inherited that. So I'm just looking at Glenn, and he's a defensive minded guy. He's a competitor. He's a winner. I think he's perfect for the Jets. Some teams need offensive minds, some teams need defensive minds, and some teams just need guys who have been around football for a long time. I don't think Glenn necessarily even is classified as a defensive minded coach because he knew offense very, very well in Detroit. That's a large reason why he was so successful. And that's what Dan Campbell actually talked about a couple of weeks ago when speaking about Glenn. I mean, he knows special teams, he knows everything. He's just a smart, smart guy, a smart coach. And the Jets, I'm looking at their owner, Woody Johnson. He ends up firing Robert Saleh, trades for Devontae Adams. It just seems like Aaron Rodgers has been running the show. And although I do want Rodgers back for this team, that can't be the move moving forward. They're going to need a GM that's on the same page at all times with their head coach and just the organization in general. Woody Johnson, I'll never forget when his son, instead of giving the game ball to the interim coach who ended up signing with the Falcons as their DC, he gives it to Garrett Wilson because of a catch he made. Didn't trade for Jerry Jeudy because his Madden rating wasn't high enough. Like, that just screams why the Jets have been so poverty for the past couple of decades. And Jeudy went for over 1,000 yards too. And then just to bring in Devontae Adams, which I did like the trade at the time, but it seemed like the Jets believed that was going to put them into the playoff conversation versus filling out other more important needs of the roster. Like, the Jets already had Garrett Wilson. Tyler Conklin's a solid tight end. Alan Lazard, like, they didn't have the best weapons in the world, but I don't think it was necessary at all for them to make that trade, just given the fact that receiver was far from their biggest issue, and they were paying Adams a ton of money, like so much money that if they're not able to restructure his contract, they're going to have to end up cutting him. So it just moves like that set a franchise back. But if anyone can fix it, it's Aaron Glenn. And this team, it's in a division that it's got Buffalo in it, but you got the Patriots, like the Dolphins. It seemed a little bit wide open too with how good this defense is. If the Jets just can make the right decisions in the draft and free agency and at coaching, they can legitimately turn this around too. And I'm excited about it too. And the last 4K passer was in 1967 for the Jets. So Rodgers throwing for 3,897 yards, now albeit 17 games, but still, I mean, it goes to show Rodgers had one of the best, maybe even the second best season in Jets history at quarterback. So they should probably keep him, but him being 41 years old, they will have to bring in his backup, like his sort of like a Jordan Love, right? I don't know if the Jets should draft a quarterback in the first round like the Packers did, but they'll just need someone for the future to be able to help Rodgers uh, sort of fill out the team because Tyrod Taylor is a solid backup, but they need someone else out there too. And I do expect them to do that. But I mean, this isn't the worst roster in the world, just given the pieces and how well it played over the last stretch of the season. I mean, you go look at the Jets like last couple of games. I mean, of course, they beat the Dolphins. The Rams game, that was a 10-point game. The Jags game, they won that. Dolphins lost in OT. Seattle lost by 5. Colts lost by 1. So really, though, I would say probably the Patriots game back in Week 3 was fun. Rodgers played so well in that. But we just saw, like, you look at Rodgers passing over the last month of the season, 339 yards, 289 yards, 256 yards, 274 yards. Like, that's what the Jets need. But also, they've got to just run this organization the way it's supposed to be. Can't have one guy making decisions. And I think the drama as well is going to have to get out of there. But yeah, I do think that the Jets will turn around. I mean, Aaron Glenn's just perfect because he's just a no-nonsense type of guy. And that's what the Jets need. Like, Robert Saleh, I think, is a good coach. But clearly there was just something missing there. I think Aaron Glenn will be able to provide that. Who knows? Robert Saleh, we saw how the defense how much it dropped, how drastically it dropped when he was let go of. So hopefully Glenn can get that back on track because the year before the Jets had one of the best defenses in football. So